Good morning. I've got your energy stories for the first week of April 2021. In the first story, Siemens Gamesa received a firm order for its largest turbine, its 14 megawatt monster. RWE signed for 100 of these for the 1.4 gigawatt Sofia wind farm, which is 195 miles offshore of the UK on the Dogger Bank. Installation is scheduled to begin in 2025 with project completion at the end of next year. Orsted may have use for giant turbines of that type, as it announced last week another gigawatt-scale plan to deploy North Sea offshore wind farms for green hydrogen production. The latest plan is to supply green H2 to a large industrial cluster on the Dutch-Belgian border. The CH2 land concept would use a 1 gigawatt electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen from a new 2 gigawatt offshore wind farm in the Dutch section of the North Sea, expected to be operable by 2030. In other news, Bloomberg New Energy Finance reported there are now 550 battery swap stations for EVs in China, with companies NIO and BAIC driving that dynamic. NIO now has 180 stations, BAIC has set up over 220, and they expect to install another 100 this year. Bloomberg New Energy Finance foresees that battery swapping could gain strength in taxis, ride-hailing, and short-haul trucking applications, as well as potentially fleet management, where fast refueling is valued. Switching to electric mobility of another nature, Finland's national airline Finnair recently expressed interest in procuring up to 20 electric aircraft from Swedish aerospace startup Heart Aerospace for use on short-haul routes, with both companies just signing a letter of interest. Heart Aerospace is working on its ES-19, a 19-passenger short-haul plane that can go about 250 miles, which is supposed to be introduced commercially by 2026. Short-haul planes are either going to be battery-driven or fuel cell-driven. Either way, it's likely sometime in the near future the Electron will be at the heart of short-haul flights. And finally, it's pretty clear the Biden administration is swinging for the fences with its infrastructure bill. As announced, the plan would include a whole lot of things, but among the key elements, a dedicated $174 billion towards a plan to, quote, win the EV market, creating a domestic supply chain for batteries and EVs. Right now, Tesla's pretty much the only game in town. GM's coming along, and a few other companies, but they all import most of their inputs, especially the batteries. This would aim to change that, offering grants and incentives to manufacturers, and also to install EV charging stations with a goal of having 500,000 of those up and running by 2030. Then there's also the goal of replacing 50,000 diesel transit vehicles and electrifying at least 20% of those yellow school buses we all know and love because we're stuck behind them every morning, and targeting 645,000 of the federal government's vehicles. Public transport also gets a much-needed boost of $85 billion, and rail gets its fair share at $80 billion. And for the renewables crowd, of great interest is the proposed federal ITC for transmission, a tax credit that would catalyze growth of at least 20 gigawatts of high-voltage capacity power lines. That would strengthen power grids across the country and help integrate and move enormous amounts of renewables from areas of free fuel to load pockets. So we could see, for example, the southwestern part of the United States that's sun-drenched become a real center for more solar energy that's exported to other areas, and the entire spine of this country exporting wind in both directions to load areas. It also looks at using existing rights of way. One of the real challenges up until now have been these NIMBY opposition-led groups that have stalled a lot of this transmission. This opportunity to use our roads and railways as our rights of way could help to address and partially defang the NIMBY crowd. And finally, there's R&D. Today, the U.S. burns through about $150 billion annually on R&D, but about half of that goes to defense. Energy research, it only gets about $8 billion today. The Biden plan would allocate $180 billion of research investment for the, quote, technologies of the future, and also direct $35 billion specifically to research and innovation related to addressing climate change and adaptation. The bill may face a tough political slog, but it also could put the U.S. firmly back in a leadership role as the world's nations continue to develop a new global energy economy. Well, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again next week.